Go ahead. All right, thank you so much, Sarah, for being here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to you and let you introduce yourself.
Okay, so really quickly, it's saying here that I cannot screen share.
Thank you. I apologize. There we go. Now you should be able to.
Okay, so let me just pull my presentation up really quickly. Give me just a moment. All right. Oop. There we go. All right, so again, we will be having a conversation today about preventing and responding to bullying behaviors. And so I first would like to introduce myself. So, oops, I somehow started us way at the end. There we go. That's where I need to be. So before actually I do that, I like to go over agreements no matter where I am, no matter who I'm talking to. I always go over agreements just to set the tone for everybody. So first and foremost, respect. I do not anticipate that there will be an issue with that at all. But I do like to just set the tone for respectfulness. Now, again, humor is acceptable. Humor is fine just as long as it is respectful. I will make sure that I try to respect everyone's time by not running over too much or anything like that. And sometimes people might disagree with stuff that I say or some of the information that's being shared, and that's absolutely fine. I love a good challenge, but just, again, remaining respectful if we have any kind of disagreements. And then step up, step back. So if you like to participate, that's awesome. However, just make sure that it's not to the point where other people cannot participate as well. And then I do want to create a safe space here. So please feel free to ask questions, even if that means you need to interrupt me. I want to make sure that everyone has all of their questions answered. And at the end, I will share my contact information so that if you process a little bit after our conversation today, you have a way to contact me and ask those questions of me as well. And then technology mindfulness. So usually what that would mean is silencing cell phones and things like that, but we're all at home, do what you need to do, answer calls if you need to. I understand that stuff comes up, but mostly for today, I just want to make sure that everyone keeps their mics muted unless they're speaking. And again, I think that there will be someone monitoring chat for questions as well for me. So that is another way that you can ask questions. And then very, very quickly, I want to go over a little bit about what it is that we do for STAR. So I do work for STAR, and the heart of our organization is our crisis line. And so that is available 24/7. That is our toll-free crisis line number. That is a place where people can ask questions, where they can get resources. Of course, people also use that if they're in crisis, but there's tons of different resources available, and that crisis line is an amazing one. And one really cool thing that I like about it is that you can remain anonymous on the line if you wish. You do not have to share any identifying information with any of the crisis line responders. And then next we have Advocacy Services, which includes crisis intervention, long-term, and also some short-term support, counseling, and case management. And then we have the Prevention and Education Department, which I'm a part of. And so we offer an ASD approved curricula. So we are able to talk to students as young as preschool age about personal body safety. All of our conversations are very age appropriate. And as they get older, we start moving towards having conversations about things like child sexual abuse and sexual assault and consent and healthy relationships, all sorts of different stuff. And we also do a lot of community-based training like the one that I'm doing here today. And we offer a lot of outreach opportunities. And best of all of our services are free and confidential. So if someone identifies as experiencing some form of sexual violence, they are able to get services through STAR for free. And so I really appreciate that. And then just because it's nice to know a little bit about the person who will be speaking to you for the next hour, I included a little personal introduction of myself. So my name is Sierra. I have been working at STAR as an educator for going on 5 years now, and I absolutely love what I do. I think it's wonderful to be able to say that I go out into the community to try to help it be a safer place to live. And I use pronouns she, her. And then lastly, I'm a huge animal lover. I really, really enjoy exotic pets, although I do have the dog. I've got a golden doodle. But I enjoy things like lizards. I've had a handful of chameleons. Currently, I have a few bearded dragons. Unfortunately, my hedgehog just passed away last week, but I also have had hedgehogs in the past and all sorts of stuff. I have a few cockroach colonies and stuff like that. So I like all the creepy crawly stuff, but I also do like the fuzzy. Oh, I'm also fostering a cat. I'm honestly running like a zoo out of my house, but yeah, so that's a little bit about me. And that brings us into our conversation about bullying. So it's important moving forward that we all have kind of a general understanding of what bullying means. So we're going to talk about power-based personal violence and bullying behaviors. So power-based personal violence is the use of violence to gain or maintain control over another person, and bullying behaviors involve an imbalance of real or perceived power. Now, there are some similarities there, being that both of these things center around power and control. So ultimately, that's what bullying is all about. It's power and control dynamic. And I do want to talk a little bit about bullying versus harassment, because I know sometimes those two terms can be used interchangeably, though they are slightly different. So bullying behaviors are unwanted, aggressive behavior that is repeated or has the potential to be repeated over time. Now, this is according to the CDC. And then harassment is unwelcome conduct that is based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, disability, or genetic information. And that is according to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So bullying and harassment are oftentimes used interchangeably when talking about hurtful or harmful behavior. And they're very similar in terms of definition. There is just that one important difference. So the distinction between bullying and harassment is that when the bullying behavior directed at the target is also based on a protected class. So that behavior is then defined as harassment, and the protected class includes, again, race, color, religion, sex, age, disability, and national origin. Now, I do want to briefly talk about language. So it's important when we are having conversations about bullying to avoid labeling someone as a bully or a harasser, and instead focus on the behavior and not so much the individual. So negative labels indicate to an individual that they are different from others. So it shames them. It's kind of shamey. And we have to remember that behavior and identity are not the same thing necessarily. So labeling a child a bully can cause them to act to fit that label. And so one of the most important steps in becoming a bully is being labeled as one. When we label a child, we're sending a message to them that we don't think that they can change. And labeling a child fully distracts from focusing on the root causes behind the initial behavior. So there are things such as like environmental or social factors that can impact someone exhibiting bullying behavior. And then labeling a child a bully leads to an increase in the bullying behavior itself. So having been labeled, the child then reacts to the label by acting aggressively against others or even themselves sometimes. So it's important to note that I don't like to use labels. And so there are several different categories of bullying behavior. There's physical, social, verbal, emotional, and then cyber. So we have physical bullying, which is the use of someone's body to harm or intimidate someone or potentially damaging their property. We have social, which are behaviors aimed at harming or damaging someone's social standing or their relationships. We have verbal and emotional, which is using words to hurt or harass others, including through writing. And then we also have cyberbullying. So this is the use of technology or electronic devices to engage in bullying behavior. So I understand that, we're living in a time, especially now, where a lot of kids are online a lot of the time. And so cyberbullying has increasingly so become a concern amongst parents and caregivers and even teachers. So I do want to quickly talk about some of the warning signs for cyberbullying. There is some overlap. I mean, a lot of these warning signs can be applied to the other types of bullying, but I know that today we kind of want to focus on cyberbullying. So if you have any questions about warning signs for other types, please feel free to let me know and then I can get that information to you. But I just still kind of wanted to laser in on cyberbullying. So many of the warning signs that cyberbullying is occurring happens around a child's use of their device, whether that be a cell phone or, more so now the laptops and stuff, since a lot of kids are still doing online schooling. And so some of these warning signs are noticeable increases or decreases in device use, including texting. So maybe they're just spending a lot more time on these than they would otherwise. or a child exhibits an emotional response when using some of those devices. So that could be anger, it could be, crying, or a child appearing to be really upset. And oftentimes they want to hide their screen. So if someone is walking behind them, maybe they'll put their computer screen down, or maybe flip their cell phone over so that someone passing by can't see what's going on. And then also that could look like maybe not wanting to discuss what's happening. So maybe if you notice some of these behaviors, you ask them a question about it and they don't want to give you any answers. So these are some warning signs. Now, another thing to note is that these aren't all necessarily indicative of something sinister happening. I mean, some of these things could just be normal developmental behavior. Like, I know oftentimes there's a power struggle, especially when we talk about puberty and wanting to detach from parents and gain more privacy and stuff like that. But all of these things are red flags and things that parents or caregivers should check in and ask a little bit more questions about. So another warning sign could be that social media accounts are shut down, or maybe popping up of a new account. So maybe a child is in Facebook jail, where they are banned from using the site for a certain amount of days. Oftentimes that is because someone has reported either comments or content that person is sharing. And then if another duplicate account shows up, that could be indicative of a few things. Maybe there's some form of identity theft, where someone is catfishing and using that child's information to create another account. Or maybe the child themselves has created another account because their prior account was flagged for some kind of behavior that was against policy. Another warning sign could be that a child starts to avoid social situations, even those that they enjoyed in the past. So maybe they're huge online gamers, that they really enjoyed Fortnite, and all of a sudden they just avoid it at all costs. That could be due to cyberbullying on the game platform itself. And then lastly, a child may become withdrawn or depressed, or they may lose interest in people or activities that they once really enjoyed. So again, none of these are necessarily indicative of something very bad happening, but these are things that we should take note of and keep track of. And then I want to quickly, before we move on, talk about what we can do if cyberbullying does happen, or if we notice some of those warning signs. So the first step is to notice. So some of the warning signs now for cyberbullying. So if you notice any of those things, then the next step would be to talk to them. So ask questions, do check-ins, ask them, what is happening, how did it start, who is involved, those kind of questions. Once you get those answers, it's really important to document what's happening. So you want to keep a record of what is happening and where it's happening. So what specific social media platform is this happening on? Or is this happening during class time? Or I know sometimes during rooms with each other. So it could be happening there. So just document where exactly it is that it's happening. And then take screenshots of any harmful posts or content, if at all possible. Because most laws and policies note that bullying is kind of like a repeated behavior. There has to be proof of a pattern. And so records do really help to document those patterns. And then next you should report. So you can make reports to most social media platforms. So they have, and even schools have clear policies about reporting, or what that process would look like. So if it's happening at school, follow through with school. If it's happening online, then there should be ways that you can contact the platform to see if you could get some of that harmful content removed. And then, of course, if it's physical threats or, content about potential crime or illegal activity, then that may be a case where you may want to get law enforcement involved. But that tends to be really rare. Most of the time, it's something that you go talk to the school or teachers or the social media platform about. You can report posts and stuff right there on the page. And then lastly, support. So we want to be able to support the person who is experiencing these behaviors. Let them know that you have seen it, that you will do something about it, and that it didn't fall on ears that are not going to pay attention or listen to them, because that is really crucial, that children and adolescents, no matter what age, that they feel supported and that someone is listening to them if there is a cry for help. All right, are there any questions so far?
No questions have come through yet. Somebody did ask if you had notes on those different suggestions that you just had that they could take a screenshot of. There was just the cyber piece, and so they were wondering if there was like the different steps that you were talking about, if there was a visual for those.
Oh, I don't have a visual, but I would be more than happy to type one up, and I can send that to Rianne. So
Awesome.
hopefully that can get sent out. I apologize for that.
No.
I tend to have all my talking points and not put them in visual. So I apologize for that, but I can't get that information.
Perfect. Thank you so much,
Make
Sarah.
note of that real quick. Of course. All right. I just want to take a quick note. So I apologize for the pause here, but I just want to make sure that I remember to get that out. So sometimes I forget. So, okay. All right, so next we're going to be talking about prevention. So what we can do to prevent bullying behaviors from happening. So how is it that we prevent this behavior? Well, first we want to focus on the social climate. So bullying prevention essentially requires changes in people's attitudes or norms surrounding this behavior. So that in and of itself takes a lot of time and a lot of commitment. And most of all, it requires positive adult role models who focus on building strong and healthy relationships with youth. So we want the norm to be now that bullying is not accepted, as opposed to in the past, oh, kids will be kids, or that's how they get a tough skin. You know, we want to move towards that's absolutely not allowed, that's not accepted, and clearly state, you know, the consequences if any of that behavior is exhibited. And I know sometimes, you know, in the past, I've been in schools where a student has cracked a joke at the expense of another student in the classroom, and the teacher just kind of lets it pass on by, doesn't really acknowledge it at all, with the attitude of, you know, that's not my business. It is passing period right now. The bell hasn't rang. So, you know, there's all sorts of different attitudes towards that. But that's a prime example of being a bystander when that kind of stuff happens. And so all of those things could potentially be teaching moments. Next, we want to seek out support for bullying prevention. So that could mean talking to your child's school and asking them, you know, what are your policies on bullying? That could be talking to an after-school care provider. And again, asking them what their policy on bullying is, making sure you know the policies for whatever social media platforms children are using, and so on and so forth. All of this to ensure that there are policies in place about bullying, and not only that there's policies in place, but that they are enforcing them, which is a huge thing. Because oftentimes people will get, you know, just a little slap on the wrist if there is an infraction, without any real clear-cut examples of what these consequences can be, or it's just not taken seriously. Next, we want to coordinate and integrate prevention efforts. So if schools and other settings where youth are gathering or and they're working towards that bullying prevention, maybe try to integrate some of those lessons into the home. So try to model that behavior as a positive role model, as a trusted adult in that child's life. So that could also mean watching how we speak and behave in front of these adolescents, which I know is a lot easier said than done. So for example, you know, let's say you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off. It's really easy to say bad words and, you know, throw up some hand gestures and do that kind of stuff because it's really frustrating. But then also we have to keep in mind, oh, there's children in the back seat that are absorbing all of the stuff that I'm saying and doing. I'm telling them it's not nice to call people names, but yet when I get frustrated, I'm calling people names. So it's important to kind of take a step back and, you know, look at what it is that we're doing as opposed to what it is that we're saying, and making sure that the two align and are not butting heads. And then next we have set rules. So I know that a lot of school behavior policies kind of implicitly forbid bullying. They don't necessarily address it explicitly. So that is important to make sure that bullying behavior will not be tolerated, and explain exactly what behavior is then expected. So I know sometimes people say, you know, we don't tolerate bullying. Well, then they don't let, sorry, I'm gonna take this off. They don't let the kids know what behavior they're then expecting of them. So this goes for in the home as well. Just let them know this will not be tolerated in this home, and this is exactly what will be happening if it does happen. However, this is the behavior that I am expecting from you. And the next, increased supervision. So bullying behaviors tend to thrive in situations where there is no adult supervision. Now, that is not to say that I am trying to tell people to monitor their kids 24/7. I absolutely know that that is an impossible task, and they're not going to have a parent over their shoulder 24/7, monitoring them. Um, but depending on age, even there may be a bit of that power struggle that I mentioned earlier about that need for separation from the parent and getting more privacy. However, still finding ways to monitor behavior is crucial, whether that be, checking in on them online, seeing what they're doing, tracking them, setting parental guidelines. Like it could be like on Netflix, you have parental controls on, or on Google search, you have parental controls on, and you're monitoring social media time and things like that. Or it could also just simply be doing check-ins with the child, like asking them how their day was, ask them what they did online. I was the guardian for my nephew for a while, and I had parental controls on everything. There's actually, I can't even remember what the app is called, but there's an app where you can monitor exactly how much screen time they have, and you can see exactly what they're using while they're on the computer and stuff like that. That was an excellent tool while he was in my care, but also I let him know, hey, at any time I may take your phone and go through it, and it's not because I'm trying to invade your privacy, but I'm trying to keep you safe. So I may go through the messages and games, because that is one spot where parents don't think to look, is in different games that they're playing online. Sometimes there's messages like messaging capabilities, so I check messages in games. I check text messages and search history and things like that. Even though I'm not there to monitor 24/7, I can see what little breadcrumbs are left behind still. And then we also have respond consistently and appropriately when bullying behavior happens. So just as some abusive behaviors are learned, children and adolescents also have the capability to be taught non-hostile alternatives. So with help, they can learn to act differently and not give in to those impulses that make them want to hurt or control someone else. So this basically means turning any bullying behavior that you witness into a teaching moment. So again, breaking it down, letting them know what is and is not okay, what is expected of them, how this may hurt the person that they're interacting with, and so on and so forth. So really just trying to make learning moments out of all of these examples. Now, there are a lot of potential causes for both bullying behavior and experiencing bullying behavior. And so I've got a list. It's by no means a comprehensive list, but it is a list of some of these potential causes. So some common causes of bullying behavior include having trouble at home or school, seeking to assert power, receiving attention for that behavior. So again, that example of a student cracking a joke in the classroom at the expense of someone else, well, their teacher didn't do anything about it, and a lot of the people around them laughed. So they're receiving that positive reinforcement and no consequences for the behavior. That could also be like high disruption at home. Maybe they're moving a bunch, or maybe there's a lot of adults coming in and out of their life. That could mean so many different things, but maybe they're experiencing some high disruption at home. Ooh, sorry, I didn't mean to click that. Okay, there we go. And then also maybe they have positive attitudes towards violence. Or they may have friends who engage in bullying behaviors. Now, this is a huge one, because if they have friends who are engaging in that behavior, there's a lot more pressure on them to also take part in that. And so really explaining to them the importance of picking good friends and teaching them how to say no and all sorts of stuff comes into play here. And then we also have some common causes of experiencing bullying behavior. Now, I will preface this by saying, none of these things in this list are the fault of the person experiencing bullying at all. There have just been several studies that show this is what people look for when they're choosing someone to exhibit bullying behavior towards. So maybe that person is perceived as being different. They're perceived as weak or defenseless. They may be experiencing depression, anxiety, or have low self-esteem. They may be viewed as difficult to get along with, have fewer or weaker peer relationships, or they may be experiencing a disability. Now, again, none of these things are that person's fault whatsoever. But unfortunately, people tend to prey on this stuff, and it is very unfortunate. And that is why this type of education is so important, so that people know that it's not okay. And there are also consequences both to experiencing and exhibiting these behaviors. So the consequences for those experiencing bullying behaviors include isolation. They may not make very many friends or have very many lasting relationships. They may feel a lot of anxiety or depression. They may self-harm. Now, this also does include, suicidal ideation or suicide attempts. They may start to withdraw from the friends that they do have. They may have a drop in GPA, trouble sleeping, loss of interest in school altogether, or they may experience a lot of physical illness. Now, being under constant stress does impact the immune system, so they may actually be getting sick. But then I know that a lot of adolescents, like a lot of really younger kids, they have trouble like explaining the emotions that they're feeling. And so oftentimes that presents itself as physical illness. So they don't understand how to express to someone that they're feeling, that pit in their stomach from being really nervous or scared. And so they might just say that their stomach hurts, or they don't know, tension in the neck and head, what that feels like, or how to explain that. So they may say they have a headache, or, stuff like that. So kids, young kids oftentimes have a hard time explaining certain big emotions that they're feeling. And it may, it's called somatization. I have such a hard time saying that. And then also the consequences of exhibiting bullying behavior can be things like early sexual activity, using substances, run-ins with law enforcement, increased physical fights, dropping out of school, engaging in partner violence, and then lastly, vandalism. So no matter if someone is exhibiting or experiencing these bullying behaviors, there are consequences to both. Now I want to take a moment again to ask if anyone has any questions or comments.
There hasn't been any that have come in the chat box.
Okay. All right, well, I will keep moving on. So now I want to talk about how it is that you respond. So at STAR, we have this 3-tier approach to responding. So this is if someone is disclosing to you that they're experiencing bullying, or if you have a suspicion that someone is experiencing bullying, this is how you would respond to that. Or even if you witness it. So this is, again, something that you can use across the board. This is something that all of our advocates are trained in. It's such a helpful tool to have in your back pocket. So what is the very first thing you would ask someone if they've been in a car accident? Now I'm going to open up this question to the group. So what is the first thing you would ask someone?
Are you okay?
Are you okay? Absolutely. That is the first step of advocacy, is assessing safety. So my supervisor actually has this really amazing story that fits so well with this 3-tier approach. So she was 16 years old. She was at a light, or she was actually about to cross a light. Someone ran the light, T-boned her. Her car spun in the intersection. The other car went off the road, and all the people got out and ran. So again, she's 16. This is her first car accident. So the first thing she does is she picks up her phone and calls her mom, like I would still do to this day. So she calls her mom and she tells her mom, hey, I was just in a car accident. And her mom was like, well, how fast were you going? And at the same time her mom is saying that, a witness to the accident came over and he knocked on her window and, was asking her to roll her window down. So she rolled the window down and he says, hey, are you okay? Well, her mom over here is asking her, well, how fast were you going? Like, what is going on? She hangs up on her mom, because this is back in the day, flip phone. So she snaps her phone shut and she starts talking to the guy at her window. So he asks if she's okay. He says, hey, you know what? Like, I saw the whole accident happen. That seemed really scary. Like, I would be so scared if I was you. My daughter got in a car accident when she was around your age too, and she was also really scared. So do you need any medical attention? So, she says yes. But what this guy did, he used a 3-tier approach to responding, whereas her mom, not so much. However, she does share with her mom that she shares that story, and that, her coworkers share that story with people. And her mom claims that she only asked how fast she was going to see how great of an impact it couldn't have been, so that she could see how injured she could possibly be, which is like, that's fine. But the man that witnessed the car accident, he absolutely used our 3-tier approach to responding. So the very first thing that you want to do is assess safety. So if you see or hear any kind of bullying behavior, you want to assess the safety of the person who is experiencing it. So you want to ask them, are you okay? Depending on what's happening, do you need medical attention? You know, you can suss this out yourself depending on the situation, but just assessing safety is the very first step. The second is to empathize. So that could sound like saying, I'm so sorry this happened to you. It could be, I'm so glad that you chose to tell me, or what happened is not your fault. Thank you so much for sharing. That was really brave of you to share that with me, you know, so on and so forth. So the second step is to empathize. And the last step is to normalize. Now, I want to be clear here that we're normalizing the experience of the person who was experiencing the bullying behavior. We are not normalizing what happened. So we're not saying, you know, oh, that's something that everyone experiences. That's how you get tough skin. Or, you know, back in my day, this was how kids communicated, or, you know, whatever that could sound like. So we're not normalizing what happened. We're not normalizing bullying behavior. We're normalizing how that person feels about what happened to them. So what you're feeling is totally understandable, because, you know, sometimes people experience something and they walk away completely unscathed and just brush it off, and that's fine. Whereas sometimes people are really shaken up by whatever they experience, and both ways are fine. And so we just want to normalize that for someone and let them know however it is that they feel is absolutely okay, and that you will be there to support them. And it's also really important here to try not to overreact, because it can be really difficult for an adolescent or youth to share with someone else, especially an adult, that they're experiencing bullying. So if we say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened, I'm going to call that kid's parents, or I'm going to go to the school first thing in the morning and they're going to hear from me and that kid's going to get expelled, that can seem really scary to that kid. So, you know, that could absolutely be something you could do, but we don't necessarily need to tell that kid in that moment all of that stuff, because that can be really scary. So we just want to try not to overreact and really just focus on the person experiencing the behavior. So we want to make it about them. We don't want to talk about the person who was doing all the stuff. Just really make sure that we are there to support them and make sure that they are okay. And then we can address all that other stuff at another time. But in that moment, it's really about the person who experienced the bullying behavior. And so that brings us to some other ways that we can help both someone experiencing and also someone exhibiting the behavior. So we can help them by letting them know that it isn't their fault. So again, that falls in line with that empathy piece that we just talked about with that 3-tier approach. So we really want to let them know that whatever happened is not their fault, despite whatever the other person said to them. And we really want to be present for them. We want them to know that they have our full undivided attention, you know, that normalization, like, thank you for telling me, you know, what you're going through. You're not alone. Thank you so much for letting me know. I'm here to support you. Let me know what you need. Or you could also reach out and include them. So this example kind of meshes well with, like, let's say you're on your chaperoning field trip and you are in charge of a little group of kids, and you notice that one of them is constantly being left out, and you can kind of tell that the other kids aren't being very nice to them. Reach out and try to include that person, like really just make them feel special in that moment. And that is, again, being a positive role model, setting the tone that, you know, that kind of exclusion is not going to be tolerated or okay, and so on and so forth. So if you see situations like that, just try to reach out and include the other person. And then lastly, offer to help them talk with an adult. So if this is your own kid, you could always offer yourself as an adult to talk to. But sometimes kids don't want to talk to their parents, and that's okay. So maybe that could look like maybe talking to a counselor, if that's an option, or talking to their school counselor even. Or you could also have them call the STAR crisis line, because all of our responders would be more than happy to speak with them, and kind of sometimes it's easier to talk to a stranger or someone that you can't really see, especially when you can be anonymous. Because it's low stakes, you know, so sometimes that's helpful for adolescents to just talk to someone over a phone. So I always offer up the crisis line, but just any way that you can help them kind of reach out and talk to someone. And then how we can help someone who is exhibiting bullying behaviors. So be clear that their behavior is unacceptable, but we also want to try really hard not to judge. So I know sometimes that can be difficult, especially depending on some behaviors, but remember there's oftentimes underlying or root causes behind this behavior, and judging them could be detrimental to them wanting to make a change. So they may not want to make a change if they feel judged. And then also try to model appropriate and safe behavior and offer to help them also talk with an adult. So, you know, especially when we're talking about someone exhibiting the behavior, it's important to acknowledge that that behavior can be changed. That's not who they are. So again, keeping away from those labels. This isn't who you are, but this is just something you're doing at this moment. I can help you change that. Would you like to talk to me? So you always want to make sure that you shame the behavior, not the child. And then keeping in mind those environmental or social factors that may be leading to those behaviors themselves. And you always want to make sure that those interactions are supportive and respectful while not condoning that negative behavior, because children have to have a safe space to change their behavior in order for it to be successful. So, you know, let them know that they are capable of change and that they do have support and all that kind of stuff. That is like the first step to kind of intrinsically helping that, like, lead them into better behavior. All right. Whew, I didn't go over. So we got plenty of time for questions. I do have my my email address there, but then that's also our local crisis line number. So I just want to give you all a heads up. So if you do call it for whatever reason and someone answers, hey, it's our crisis line, don't be alarmed. All of our business calls are being rerouted to our crisis line at the moment, just because we're all still working from home. So that was my contact information. And I know I went through this pretty quickly. It's difficult to try to condense a lot of information into, you know, 30 to 45 minutes. So I apologize if I went through something a little bit more quickly than you would have liked. If you want me to go back and revisit some information, I would be more than happy to do so. But other than that, if you have any questions, this is a time to let me know.
Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and pause or stop the recording so that people feel comfortable to turn off their cameras if they'd like.